to the hospital with his wife to have the baby. He said, we're headed into the hospital to verify Ashley Waters broke, but we'll keep you posted if we're gonna stay there or come home. And then he basically decides that they could stay. And so my husband wrote, this is so classic Ron Novak, he decides to share with him some wisdom about what not to say to your wife. Okay, so my husband wrote, congrats, never ever tell Ashley you're almost done. I did that and was punched and bitten. So I wrote back and said, well, that is true. For 2 hours, Lon said, I can see his head, this is the last push, and then I lost it on him. Okay? But the reality is all of us can feel that what rebellion feels like. It's the ability, like the inability to regulate. And that's why we have to talk so much about social emotional learning, because if you're experiencing trauma in your life, you're so much closer to that breaking point. And we have to design knowing that that's just a reality, and many of these kids carry around things that we could not carry around. And it's saying, well, what kind of environment allows them? So it's not just about the lesson, it's about the environment. You know, how we talk to kids. The power of our words. I was reading The Power of Our Words by Responsive Classroom, and they were saying that, like, a story about a kid who came in late, and do you have your homework? No. Huh. What a surprise. I mean, you're just asking for a kid to go into the red. Okay, do you have your homework? No. Thank you for being honest. I'm so happy you're here. Okay, that's a choice to be more inclusive socially, emotionally, right? And so we have to think about all of these things. So let's talk about the true meaning of engagement. My only hobby is woodworking. I love woodworking. So that right there, that's called a makeout glider. It was at my parents' house all through high school. And a lot of people were like, how is it the makeout glider? There's this thing in the middle. Okay, there is a barrier. But again, that's what we called it. And so I found that in my dad's junk pile. And I'm like, why is the makeout glider in the junk pile? And he's like, it's literally falling apart. I'm like, I'll save it. And so it turns out I have to actually take this whole darn thing apart and fix all the boards. But ultimately, that was the creation. And so when I talk about engagement, this morning I said it requires discomfort. This thing was not fun to make. Okay? And when you think about what it means to be a learner, how many times it would have been easier to give up. Okay? And so that concept of learning means I wanted it bad enough that when I bought the wrong screws, I went back. Okay? When I cut my finger and got a blood blister, I just put on a Band-Aid, right? And how do we create that in kids to like want to be engaged? And so what we want to do is we're not only trying to get students to be accessing their education, okay, accessing it, but we're trying to get them engaged enough that they can be innovative, which means they can like chart their own path. And the kids who are the least likely to get this are the kids who are the most historically marginalized. Okay? Remedial curriculums are so compliance-based. They're very scripted. They do not connect to why this is important. They do not allow kids to personalize their learning. You know, you have to follow the program. And so when you do that instead of this, kids lose. When you do that in addition to this, you close that achievement gap. So in Groton Dunstable, what we did is we actually adopted a new schedule. We have a 50-minute period every day that we call the WIN block. It stands for What I Need. Okay, that is where everything on a C grid will happen for special education. Okay, that is where intervention will happen if a kid is struggling in your math class who is not on a C grid necessarily or getting special ed services. We moved to co-teaching, so everything on the B grid could be actually incorporated without having to put so many things on pullout. And so in doing that, we have given every kid access to an education where they truly have options and choices that they need. And then, you know, Aylin, during that WIN block, will go and get Orton Gillingham. Brecken, during that WIN block, goes to an enrichment class, and he's designing a website. You know, my older son goes to an additional class of PE, and they do competitive sports, right? It's like, are we really creating a system that gives all kids what they need? And so I want to talk about, this is a great study. This guy's out of UCLA, his name is Dr. Stigler, and he did a study that said, how good are American kids at working hard? And so he went to like all these different countries. He did Canada, he did Finland, he did Japan, he did the United States. And basically he wanted to see, when given an unsolvable math problem, frequently would kids quit? So like the answer is that it's an imbalanced equation. There's no real answer. And so, again, this is not going to be a surprise to anyone. The average American student quit after 30 seconds. In the Japanese study, which again, you can read it, this is a peer-reviewed study, they had to stop the session in an hour because the kids were still trying to work on it. You know, and we're like, I just don't think there's an answer, but they were like, they were not stressed, they were not, and they're basically saying like, we have a huge, huge issue that we don't value struggle. We don't value discomfort, and it's a necessary part of success. And when we don't make kids uncomfortable, especially because we fear their reaction or we feel bad, again, there's such a big deficit there. If you don't know how to struggle, you won't be really successful, period, end of story. And so it was a pretty interesting study. So let me show you what most of our kids are like. And I love them, but this is true. This is what most of our kids do, is they're paying attention. Like, these people want to get to their meeting. And then they hit a barrier. And the barrier is at the end of their stop. Now, resourceful people would figure out how to get off it. Oh, you're late.
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? Read this. You gotta be kidding me. Well, so now let's do it.
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. That's more like it. He said he can fix it.
Sometimes, where you know, like, everybody get going on this, and you walk around and it's been like 10 minutes, and you're like, buddy, you haven't started, and he's like, I forgot my pencil, and you're like, I literally have an entire can of them on my desk, and your partner has one, and you have a Chromebook in front of you. Oh, and you're like, what, am I in a warp zone? Like, what is happening? But again, is if you don't have practice actually kind of doing your own thing, like, it's something you have to get good at, just like reading. You have to be given lots of opportunities to think about the goal and figure out how you're going to reach the goal. And we don't do that. We just basically say, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, let me put this in front of you. And then when they're left to their own devices without us, i.e. on a standardized test, they have no ability to problem solve. It's just like, I can't do it. And then they retreat or they rebel, and then we can't close that gap. And so this right here is my little love Bowden. He's 4. We went to touch a truck, and he got these cute little gloves from an ambulance. And the reason I like this video so much, you can hear my oldest son in the back being like, Mom, I can't blow this up. He's trying to blow up the hand. But I want you to think about, this is 40 seconds. How painful it is to watch him struggle. And as an educator, just think of how bad you want to give him some support. Like a verbal prompt, putting your hands on. Okay, so just watch. It's a little painful, it's only 40 seconds. just think about that, like, and I did it like experimentally. I wanted to just grab the glove so bad and put it on, right? So you watch that and you're like, and then we wonder like, what, you know, kids quit, because we as adults swoop in. And that's a real implicit message that struggle is a bad thing. You know, you don't want to have that. Somebody else needs to help you. And then you get flipping stuck on the escalator, right? So UDL is both a progression for you and it's a progression for your students. Because first of all, you have to start giving choices, which you might not do yet. And students have to start making choices, which they might not do yet. And both of those things require growth. And that's why, again, I started with that Picasso picture. This is not something that suddenly it's like, tomorrow I'm changing everything. It's like, tomorrow I'm going to start changing a couple of things. And over time, when you change a couple of things, it's going to make a big difference. But I want you to think of yourself as emerging designers. So my husband and I are both runners. And when we ran the Spartan Beast, the next day the kids wanted to run their little kid Spartan Beast. And I told them to look mean in the picture. And Bowden's like ruining it with his cute little smiley face. But I'm like, yeah, you're Spartans, look tough, right? And so my husband and I, the Spartan Beast and Killington ended up being about 18 miles with obstacles and things. And theirs was like a half a mile. And when they were done, they were like, woo, like we're runners, we're Spartans just like you. And it was kind of like, oh my gosh, that's adorable. Because they are starting that journey, but they are not runners like me. Okay? And that's okay. We all have to start our journey there. I started my journey there. And so what happens is when you start running, you obviously run much shorter distances and you run much slower, and that is a part of the progression of what it means to be a great runner. Okay? If you went out on like the first time you ran and was like, I think I'm gonna try to kill 10 miles at an 8-minute clip, you will never wanna run again. And so like the reason I'm saying this is like, you're not gonna suddenly decimate everything you're doing and it's like all options, all choices, because you will end up with kids like completely incapacitated by choice. So you're gonna need to scaffold this too. And then when you start getting better at it, when you start getting comfortable at running, you run longer, you run faster, you know, eventually you start doing this really independently. You know, these cross-country ladies, you know, they like get up in the morning and they actually run on their own. They probably know like fueling strategies and like when they have to put ice on their knees. And that's great. And they're like runners now. You can call yourself a runner, you know, when you're going out and running that much. But they're not at like the end of their game. They're no expert at running. I mean, there's guys and ladies who, you know, win the Boston Marathon and they're like the elite running. But the thing that I love about this analogy is he's probably the hardest worker. He's the most voraciously looking for new information. And it's almost like in some professions and sometimes like teaching, it almost feels like, well, I've been doing this for a really long time, so I'm good. But like a runner still has to go out and run every single day. You know, still has to learn, are there better sneakers? Is there better refueling strategies? You know, do I need a better trainer? I gotta be able to run faster. How do I come back from this injury? You know, and now people are doing things like the cupping and the acupuncture, right? It's like, how can I get an advantage? And so, you know, this is something that it's just like, we can't just say, I'm already doing this. You've never, ever done, even if you're practicing some of this in some way. Okay, it's not something you're doing, it's our kids' expert learners, and looking at data, the answer is no. We intend to do it, the impact is kids are not learners yet, and that's okay, and I'm just as responsible for that as you. So we have to look at this progression, and so the UDL progression rubric is a tool that kind of shows you what this might look like when you start. And then what it might look like as you get a little more proficient, and as you become a little bit more like progressing towards expert practice. But you're not done. That just means your kids are expert learners. And now you just have to work with them. So when you first start, this is again, one of the guidelines reminds you that sometimes the barrier is that kids just are not interested in what you have to do. And so one of the checkpoints is give them choice. There's a lot of research that when you give kids choice, they're going to be more engaged. More kids will be more engaged. So when you first start, it might be so small. It might be like, we used to all do this study on France, and now it's going to be like, okay, imagine you're traveling to a French-speaking country. Here are 15 French-speaking countries, you're going to choose one of them. Even at that, you will have kids that cannot make that choice. Which one should I pick? You're like, oh my, pick one out of a hat. Like, it doesn't even matter. But when kids have not been able to make choices, even something that small will lead kids to be like, I'm not sure which one I want to pick. Okay, you might want to start it just the way that you teach. So you might do a mini lesson for 15 minutes and say, hey, you have like 10 more minutes to explore this on your own. You can either do these, work on these problems, you could watch this Khan Academy video, or you can come over here with me in a small group and I'll explain it again. Okay, so it's not, I'm gonna do all three, it's literally like you have the choice. Okay, and again, acknowledging and embracing that the first couple times they do this, they might not make great choices. You might do it within an assessment. You look at your standard and you say, you know what, this standard, I make them all right, but it's really not a writing standard. If it is, then they all have to write, okay? But you say this one really isn't, so I would say to them, you can make a poster, like an interactive poster, and we're talking like a scientific poster. You don't go to a conference and put glitter on a scientific poster, okay? We're talking infographic poster here. Or you can write a paragraph. Which one's more accessible to you? That's where you're gonna start. And over time, as kids start to get more comfortable with this process, you can then kind of pull back a little bit and start saying, okay, I have given you the options, guys. You have 10 minutes to study this physics concept, and then I'm gonna give a quiz, okay? A quick formative quiz. You can either go back into the book, you can watch this video, you can come over here with me. If you have another way to prepare, then do that. Okay, so now they're getting a little bit better at making choices. So then you have some kids who are like, can me and a partner go over our notes? Yeah, sure. I don't care. I'm still giving you a quiz in 10 minutes. Okay, but what you'll know is that kids are getting better when they start to actually say, remember that graphic organizer you gave us on that? Can I use that again? Okay, that's the beginning of like glory of like, oh my gosh, they're starting to think. So it's beautiful. The goal of UDL is not for you necessarily to do this thing on the right, it's for them to get there. Which means that when you give them options, okay, they either will choose one of the options or they'll suggest alternatives. And then also is you're at that point more facilitating than directing. Okay, because they're not all like rushing over to you. Okay, and again, this is a process. Okay, so you're not suddenly going to be like, all right, here's the standard, you tell me how you're going to get there, because it's going to be like shock and awe. So there's a couple of different tools for you to learn a little bit more about UDL, and I'm going to let you explore them in just a minute. There's that progression rubric that I just showed you, this is the flow chart, there's a bunch of different things. You can just continue to talk, but right here, this is like the magic of like the thing you must keep in mind when it's tempting to say, but what if they make really bad choices? You're going to give them the option, every kid, no matter what, okay? And the reason you're going to give them the option is because they need practice at building their executive functioning skills. So you're going to say, this is the goal, okay? You will be able to tell me at least one of the causes of the Civil War after this 30-minute class. Everyone will. I'm going to put it on the board, that is the goal, okay? You have to not only tell me, but you have to tell me why, okay? Now, here's your option. And then I'm going to say, here's your tools, here's your thing, go do it. Okay? I will let any kid take a micro failure that first time. Okay? Not if they're disrupting everyone. I'll call them over there, they're being disruptive. But let's say that there's a kid like that's literally watching like some other YouTube video or something. I'll let it ride the first time because I'm going to nail them in the review part. Okay? Because what ends up happening, and this is why UDL and DI are so beautifully interwoven, is I'm going to say, okay, so now I'm giving you a quiz. I told you what you needed to do. You had an opportunity to do it. This is how you're going to express to me what you've learned. Anyone who does really well is going to have the option to do these things. If you don't get it yet, that's okay. I'm going to pull a small group and I'm going to reteach everything. Okay? I am telling you, you do that a couple times, suddenly magically everyone starts making some really good choices. And it's because it's truly, this is what you have to know. You're going to know it no matter what. I can't let you fail. And when data suggests that I need to fill a cavity, I will fill a cavity. And again, you might have to do that a couple of times. If somebody was really causing problems, like watching something inappropriate, I would be like, you're over here with me now. Okay? But again, I want to give them the opportunity every single day to try. So check out some of these options here. See which, if any of them kind of speak to you. If not, just kind of keep talking about this concept of how can you begin to offer some choices in your content area and level. Okay, I'll put on some music, and then in 3 minutes, I'll model a lesson for you. Okay? Any curriculum has goals, methods, materials, and assessments. UDL is, how can we maintain the integrity of the standard and still allow kids to have some personalization in their goals and methods and materials and assessments, right? That's really what it is. It's the self-differentiation. It's the option and the access to self-differentiation, even though we may also have to differentiate instruction. Okay, that's a part of that. And so sometimes you'll hear about UDL and you get a little skeptical because you're like, you know, how are we gonna eliminate 100% of barriers for every kid? That hasn't been done yet, okay? But you can have so many more kids be so much more successful when you design with inclusion in mind. When you are actually valuing the fact that you're gonna have kids who face barriers, you can anticipate what those barriers are and you can begin to design around them. And so it's not saying that like you're gonna have a goal that's different from the standard, but like if the standard is that all of us will be able to write an argument that uses the 3 rhetorical strategies of like pathos and logos and ethos, you might give me a choice about what I want to write about. And you might allow me to do it as either a speech or a written piece or like a letter to like a legislator or something like that. And you might allow me to use graphic organizers or read a couple of really well done rhetorical speeches like a JFK or a Martin Luther King. You know, and you may allow me for the actual assessment to either turn in the paper or to give the speech to the class or something like that, right? That gives me the opportunity to set goals, even though I have no choice about the fact that I am literally going to write an argument that includes these 3 things. But my goal is, you know what, I'm really pissed off about this new law in class. New law in Massachusetts. You can only have 3 dogs without a farmer license. Yeah. And some of you are as horrified as I am. And I foster puppies all the time. And so you need a farming license in our town if you're gonna have more than 4 dogs, and that significantly hampers my ability to cuddle little puppies who need homes, right? So I, as a kid, this is my daughter's latest beat. So Aylin is awesome at jujitsu. Like she has been invited not to attend the 4 to 8-year-old class, and now is in the 9 to 12-year-old class. Okay, and I guess she has no fear. Like she doesn't think about consequences of like attack, right? So she's actually really, really good at jujitsu. So at the beginning of jujitsu, we're all going around and they're like, it was the end of the summer, and they're like, what is your goal this week? Like what is one thing you really want to do this week? And the kid's like, I want to download Pokemon Go on my Nintendo Switch. Someone else like, I want to visit my grandmother. And anyone's like, I want to end puppy mills. And the instructor's like, I'm sorry, excuse me. She's like, puppy mills. You know, when they like kidnap dogs off the street, they make them keep getting pregnant and they steal their babies away from them. And I'm like, let's calm down, okay? But you could get her to do anything if she's allowed to talk about animal rights. Okay? So the goal is like, some people say, like the goal is like, how are you gonna get a kid? No, you're all doing an argument. But you have the choice of what you wanna argue. And again, you are gonna have a couple of friends who are gonna be like, I don't care about anything. And I'll be like, wow. So that means that you think this assignment is pointless. Yeah. Can you write why you think the assignment is pointless? That'd be a great argument for me. And they've done it. They've been like, you are the worst teacher because I'm like, that's really compelling that I need more imagery. Like, I need to see me a little bit better. And again, I'll go all day with them and I'll be like, really? Okay, so here we go. So when we talk about inclusion, the research on inclusion says that the educator is doing all of these things. And you have these slides, I'm not going to read them to you, but like essentially what you can see is those 3 UDL guidelines are there. You have to provide a lot of different options for students to be engaged, to work hard, and also to regulate. The mindfulness breaks, the break cards, the ability to listen to music or chew gum or have a snack. Sometimes those little things make a big difference. You know, if you go down a little bit, it talks about you have to present content in multiple means. That's like video or audio or visuals, and then it also says providing options for student communication. But the last bullet says use data to differentiate instruction. You gotta do both. You design for all, you remediate when necessary. Okay? And when you do that, the student is actually demonstrating autonomy and self-advocacy. The student is doing more work than you in the classroom. And if that is true, Students are not the same, so they will definitely not choose all the same things. So that class actually supports a variety of tasks and learning formats. And once the classroom does that, then you can start saying, we don't need these 3 different levels. Because kids are doing all these different things anyway. You know, we don't need this separate math group. Because students can get the support they need in the class. And that's literally what happened in Groton Dunstable. It's like every year we were recognizing we don't need to do this anymore. And so when we said to our teachers, listen, we're gonna phase out our leveling in 4 years. We're gonna offer open honors classes, which any kid can take, and they can take it for honors credit or regular credit, and they have to sign a contract at the beginning. Anyone can choose to do the honors credit. And it's not quantity, it's literally depth. So like everyone's writing a short story, but if you want the honors credit, you actually have to write also a proposal to get it published. And you have to like send it in and try to get it published and then reflect on how knowing that it might be seen by lots of people affected the writing process, that kind of thing. And what's amazing about that is this is the first year that we've done it across the board, and we have kids who never saw themselves as learners, who did not take honors credit, who are now 50% of the kids who did not take honors credit, we just did a survey, 51, said that next year they will. 50% of kids who are not honors students were like, crap, I could have done that. Because now they're in classrooms where they're seeing like, honors isn't this unreachable thing. It's just diving in. So anyway, I'm gonna show you a lesson really quick. I'm literally gonna bust through it. If you were my class, I would always start off, now this what I'm doing is aligned to this here, which is if you go under number 4, it says the UDL Teacher's Guide. And this is essentially, when you're designing a UDL lesson, these are the parts that you're thinking about. And this doesn't have to be every day. This is like in the lesson. A lesson might take 3 days. Okay, a lesson might take 5 days if you're doing like a really intricate lab. But it's really thinking about setting a goal at the beginning of class and allowing an opportunity for students to actually like reflect and think about that goal. Okay? Then you're gonna do some sort of direct instruction. UDL does not eliminate the need for high quality teaching. Okay? So there's gonna be some sort of mini lesson. Usually the research says 10 to 15 minutes. A mini lesson has 4 very specific parts. If you're interested, that's all research-based. Then there's gonna be some opportunity for self-differentiated learning, followed by some opportunity for some sort of self-differentiated assessment. And then ultimately, once they have done the self-differentiated assessment well, I want to see if they can transfer that to something more standardized. So if you look at the UDL flowchart, it will also say, you know, did all students meet your standard on your university design assessments? And if they did, it says, try to see if they can transfer it to something more standardized now. Okay, so just know that those tools exist. But here we go. You walk into my class, I say, all right, lovies, let's go. Like, we're killing it. I want you to look at that picture right now, and I want you to turn to somebody next to you, and I want you to tell them, what does that remind you of? Ready, go. 5 seconds. What does it remind you of? Christmas ornaments. I also heard, you know those balls that kids play with, like, right? I'm gonna go with those. Anyone know the technical name for that type of ball? Someone Google it. Okay. Like a accordion ball? Yeah, they're cool. I'm gonna pretend it's an accordion ball. What this is, my friends, is the HPV virus. Yeah, baby. Anyone get virus? Heck yeah. All right. Now, all I did, it's like a 30-second do now. I have your attention, right? Now, here's the amazing thing about this. My standard, okay, this is a wellness standard for middle school. I have to make sure that all of the kids can discuss and demonstrate how to prevent germs and viruses and bacteria. And then, like, once you get to high school, this becomes more STD-based, but, like, we talk about Ebola and Triple E, and, like, I mean, there's a pandemics everywhere around this world, okay? And so it's essentially, I need you to know how stuff spreads. So this is the beautiful, beautiful HPV virus. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that you have contact lenses that allow your eyes to see through a microscope, okay? So you're gonna put on your microscopic eyes, and you're gonna look around, and this accordion ball is crawling over everything in this room. Okay, HPV is literally, it's almost a public health crisis. We're like vaccinating our kids against it. Okay, it's a very pervasive virus. So it's on these tables, it's on your computer keys. If you go to the bathroom, it's gonna touch the door. Okay, I want you to see these little balls everywhere. Now, 80% of us will contract the HPV virus through a common wart. A plantar's wart is also HPV, and so are genital warts. But as we think about this concept of getting a wart, 80% of us will get common warts. And when you say that, you're gonna automatically, as middle schoolers and high schoolers, being like, you're so lame, I won't get warts. And I'm gonna say, yes, you are gonna get warts. You're much more likely to get warts than to not get warts, right? And the cool thing about understanding how warts are spread, now, again, this is my way to get people to like actually start reflecting, start connecting. I have to make it authentic. No one cares about reading about some outbreak of something in another country. But I'm going to convince all the children they're getting warts. So, now, the only way that you can possibly get a common wart or a plantar's wart is through an entry site. Okay, all viruses and germs and bacteria need an entry site, like our nostrils and our ears and other openings. And so when we think about that, you have to think about, well, how do you get an entry site on your hand? Or how do you get an entry site on your foot? And if you have this entry site, it's basically like a wart motel, right? The entry site is like doors, like welcome HPV. And then that little bugger can incubate for 8 months. What other thing incubates for that long? Literally, like you get the common colds. What else does? Rabies? I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought rabies came quickly. Okay. Right, babies and HPV, that's it. Okay. So what we have here is you have an entry site, HPV comes in, you get a wart in 8 months. That's wild, right? So here's the thing. I'm going to have you self-reflect. This is very important. I want you to look at your hands. Now there's 2 types of entry sites, okay? There are microabrasions, which are little bitty tiny entry sites. They're openings that did not bleed. Look at your hands. Okay, where do most people get a lot of entry sites on their hands? But the ones that don't bleed. The nails, hangnails. Where's the most common place to get a wart? Around your nails, okay? So hangnails, blisters, scrapes. Just think of them now as like a welcome mat for germs and disease, right? And then you have maceration. And when you have a maceration, you have a story, because it bled. So I want you to look at your hands, figure out at your table who has the best scar of a maceration or an actual maceration, and we need stories. Look at your hands and talk. Go. Okay, you have any? It's so much more complex, but it's that simple. So if you have entry sites on your hands, you need to make sure that either you close the door or you end up washing out that room before the you make sure that if you do have an open entry site, how can you make sure that nothing gets in it? Say it out loud. Band-Aid, plastic gloves. So like a lot of the times, ladies and gentlemen, if we go get our nails done, they're wearing plastic gloves, they're protecting their own nails. They don't want our viruses. Okay. So, what you do is, you either cover up the entry site. So a lot of people think you only need to wear a Band-Aid when something bleeds. You wear a Band-Aid to cover an entry site. And the other option is, if you choose not to cover it, that's totally cool too. But you have to wash your hands enough that it's not gonna close. And a really small microabrasion, skin is amazing, can actually seal itself up in like 4 or 5 hours. Like a really small microabrasion. Now, how many of your students wash their hands every 4 to 5 hours? 0. Okay? Now, after I give this presentation, suddenly I can't buy enough hand sanitizer. Okay? Everyone's really into it for like 3 days and then they forget about it. So, anyway, I'm not going to let a bunch of teenagers go and be like, I'm going to get warts, because literally, warts are not a big deal at all. Okay? The best treatment for warts, which is actually statistically significant, this is true, this is from the New England Journal of Medicine, you have a much better resolution rate with duct tape than nitrogen freeze. And that's true, that's scientific. Okay? So like you go to the dermatologist, or you go to CVS and get the Dr. Scholl's, it goes away, but 40% of people, the wart will come back. With duct tape, only 15% will come back. Okay? So, now you know. And now listen, I know you're not going to want to go sporting around with duct tape on your hands, because then everyone will be like, what's up, warts? You know? But it's a lot of different colors. It looks like a Band-Aid. It's lovely. So just don't freak out. It's okay. Now, that would be the end of my direct instruction. Okay, my direct instruction is I'm planting the seed. I provided numerous access points. I tried to get you to reflect. There were visuals. There was like a lot of realia, looking at each other's hands. There was like connecting, building empathy, collaborating. So then I would say this, okay, you have 15 minutes to learn more about this, okay? Then I'm gonna give you 10 minutes to reciprocally teach. So 15 minutes, silent. You can chew gum, you can go sit down on the floor, you can go in the corner. If you want to keep in one earbud, that's totally fine with me. And your choices are, in that 15 minutes, you can either go through the CDC brochure. Right now they have like 6 of them on HPV. Okay? And actually go through that. And we'll talk about the prevention and the treatment. You can go to the textbook chapter in science. And a lot of you are going to go, I don't want to go into the textbook. Textbooks are beautifully organized, so you'll know what the test questions are going to be. Or you can watch a video on Google Classroom. Okay, now once kids got better at being independent, I would have a 4th choice to work with me in a small group, but I would not do that the first couple times. Because you want to walk around and see what they're doing. Okay? And then after 10 minutes, it would be like, okay, you can join me in a small group, and I'm not going to give you anything. I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions, ask you to explain things, being like you're on the right track, let's connect. Or you can get with partners, and then kids started getting really strategic. Because like, let's say that you're sitting next to that, like you go to the brochure, I'll read the textbook, and then we'll swap in those 10 minutes. Okay, but you have a kid who doesn't have the ability to decode yet, and they're gonna watch a video, which they can translate the subtitles, and then work with me to get ready, for example. And then I'm gonna say, after that 25 minutes is up, I am going to give you a quiz. It's a competitive quiz. You know, anyone who gets everything right gets a Jolly Rancher. Okay, if you don't get at least 7 right, you're gonna come over with me in a small group. That's where you end up with the differentiated instructions to plan. I'm not going to let kids go on to do something when they can't answer the questions about it. Okay? So that would be self-differentiated learning. And I would just always say, all right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to choose your own adventure. Tell me what your strategy is going to be. And if you don't pick it, I'm going to pick it for you and you're not going to like it. And then I would go to, basically activating the effective network. Never, ever, ever have more than 6 choices. There is a lot of research on something called the rule of 5. That once you have more than 5 options to do something, some people it takes them a really long time to decide. Like if I said you could do one of these 20 things, it will take you longer than if you have 5. So you can so now that you know about basically the spread and prevention of diseases, it's specifically HPV for this. You could write a poem or a song about that. You could write a letter to the wart on your hand, and you need to apologize to it, because if this is on you, like you didn't wash your hands, or you didn't cover it up, or and then I would always tell the kids, this is the one I'm going to do, you can do it with me in a small group. Okay, because then I have an exemplar for one of them. You might say you can do a podcast, because again, some kids' writing might be the barrier. And with a podcast too, you could even use like almost like a Powtoon where they wouldn't even have to speak. And then I would always have a super challenge, and people are like, oh, kids aren't gonna choose the hard one. I would have so many kids choose this, and I'd be like, you are being taken advantage of by your dermatologist. Like, you probably paid $10,000 for that nitrogen freeze, and the wart is back. So like, I want you to, and the kids would be like, I'm gonna do it. And I'm like, stay formal, stay formal. So they would do this. All of this is not my summative assessment. This is still a part of my teaching and learning. Once I know they have this, now I'm gonna give them something like a common assessment. They have the knowledge and skills to do well. Now I'm gonna say, here's an excerpt from the CDC about how to prevent and treat diseases. Using writing, and that might mean Google Read and Write or Graphic Organizer, explain how to prevent and treat the common wart. And I guarantee you every kid has a really good shot. And that's what UDL is about. Okay, so that's just an example of what it might look like. Now, since you're secondary, I added this slide real quick, which is there's always this concern about, but if we do this, are we really preparing them for college? The answer is yes. College is doing this so much more than you could ever imagine, and here's why. We are now up to 56% of kids who enroll in college will never graduate with a degree. It is more than half. Okay, it is the nation's biggest scandal right now. Is we get them through high school, we get them all into college, and we think we're done, and more than half of them will never graduate. As a result, when they drop out, their tuition goes with them. Okay, so there's a huge crisis in higher ed right now, because I can only stay open. Now, let's take apart the top tier schools. The top tier schools, like your UCLAs, your BCs, your Stanfords, they're still doing whatever they want, right? But I'm talking about all other schools that are competing, right? They need to make sure that kids are in school. So I just wrote a textbook. Again, I wouldn't recommend it, it's a gore fest, but no, it's really interesting. It's very research-based. It's looking at 18 different countries and the laws about UDL and higher education. The Higher Education Opportunity Act in the United States has been requiring UDL. But it talks about, again, we have so many different countries, so it's like in Chile and Brazil, and so we work with authors all over the place. So I did the editing, I didn't do the writing, and it's fascinating if you're like a college professor. You might not love it. But, so anyway, so what we know is that we have an education apocalypse in higher ed. So if I am in a school, you know, a local school, a state school, and I have kids that don't stay in and then their money goes away, I'm gonna close. And they're basically estimating that like 8 out of 10 higher education institutions that are here today will not be here in like 20 years. So what do I have to do? I have to make sure that my college is so flexible that no one drops out. And you see this. Colleges, only 1 weekend a month, right? Get your whole degree online. I had somebody come out from Grand Canyon University to GD who said, I will come to your school once a week for anyone who wants to take our online master's degree. And they can sit with me for like accountability for tech things, because sometimes it's just like, I don't know how to use the tech, I'm gonna drop out. Okay? There are so many more options and choices in college than there will ever be in public high school. I promise you, I spent the last 3 years of my life researching this because it's financial. Our kids have to come to us. Okay? If they fail, we still get paid. Okay? In colleges, if they fail, you close down, everyone loses their job. You know, with the exception of a very small slice of really top tier schools, they're just kind of falling apart. So it's pretty interesting to dive into that. So it is now time for lunch, but again, as I said this morning, you have to accept non-closure from this. You can't go out and suddenly change the world here, but I want you to, as you're kind of getting up and walking to leave here, what is one thing that you could do as a first step to make your class more inclusive? And chat about that as you get up and go to lunch, and thank you so much.